Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the Denver Broncos 2024 offseason. We're going to go over all the departures, acquisitions, and also review their draft picks. And at the very end of the video, we're going to break down their 2024 schedule and give our record prediction. But before we get into that, if you have not already, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tackle that bell to get notified when new videos come out. We have videos coming out every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And once when the season starts, we're going to have weekly prediction videos for all the Denver Broncos games that you're not going to want to miss. So tackle that bell to get notified when new videos come out. Ryan, let's pull up the slide here of their team, 2023 team stats. So we got these off Pro Football Reference here. And just not a good season overall for the Denver Broncos. I think the Let's Ride era of Denver Broncos, I think everybody's excited for that to be gone as well. We have the Bo Nix era that's coming in, and as we'll get to the throughout this video as well, I think that's going to be this is a stopgap Bo Nix year, in my personal opinion, because I think he's just going to be. I think this team is going to be set up to fail in the 2024 season as we kind of go through this roster. Just they're trying to get rid of all the stuff that came in before Sean Payton as well. I still don't think this is going to be the guy. And just looking at these numbers here, 2023, I think, is an example of that. They're just trying to still kind of clean house and move on from some of these guys because it just wasn't a good year at all for the Broncos team.
No, I mean, so this is the last division that we've done, and I don't know if there has been more than one or two other teams that have been in the low 20s in both offensive and defensive stats.
Yeah,
in total yards allowed and total yards gained. So not a good. When you're in the low 20s in both, not a good recipe for success. But the one thing I will say, so they were average in turnovers and they were slightly below average in the running game. So that is like something to hang your hat on there. And they did generate 26 turnovers, which was slightly above average. So that is that is good on the defensive side of the ball. Part of that was, and I don't know if this is like just my impression, but some of the games that they played in were like a little chaotic in the sense of it felt like turnover after turnover, very sloppy play. A lot of people taking shots down the field that really aren't open. It just was a very weird season. And they even had, I will say, they even had a stretch there for 4 or 5 games where it looked like they had turned it around and were doing well. But it was just a very odd season for the Denver Broncos.
Well, I think it started out. I think they were very limited with their player leadership and his overall quality at the quarterback position. I'm talking about Russell Wilson as well. I think too. Then to back up your point as well, but just how weird of a season it was. Is I remember there was pretty sure it was the Browns game, but I forgot what it's called. But there's something called when you have a score that has never happened in NFL history before. I forget what it's called. Well, they had 2 of those this past season. And a reporter brought that up to Sean Payton after they beat the Cleveland Browns 29-12 because that score has never happened before. And Sean Payton was like, "What was the second one?" I was like, the reporter was unsure if he should say it, but it was the Miami Dolphins 70-20 game that they lost because that score had also never happened in NFL history before either. And I think it is, to your point, just what a weird season it was. But then they did have a little stretch there in the middle where it seemed like they kind of figured out how to go and play, but they had to play perfectly offensively, which was little to no turnovers. And Russell Wilson had to somehow get 200 yards passing. It was just odd. It was just very odd the way they played. And I think a lot of it started from his leadership on the field and then his overall capabilities at quarterback moving down. So I think Broncos fans are excited for that Russell Wilson era. As happy and as great as it was when it first happened, the news first broke, I think people are just as excited for it to be over.
I think they're way more excited for it to be over.
Way more excited for it to be over. And so, but let's move on though to the departures here as well. And then no shock, obviously Russell Wilson, but I think an even bigger one before that, and got these off over the cap and on snap percentage played. Lloyd Cushenberry was the starting center. Russell Wilson left as well. Joseph Jewell, Jerry Jeudy got traded to Cleveland. Jonathan Harris, Stephen Tackle, and Chris Manhertz as well. And then still a couple of free agents, guys that are out there. And if there's anybody that we missed, please let us know as well. But Justin Simmons, safety, Fabian Moreau, cornerback, Mike Purcell, Cameron Fleming, Dwayne Washington. I will say there's not anybody here that, I mean, whenever you lose a starting center, that's big. But at the same time, though, too, it's not like the offensive line was that spectacular to begin with. So they were going to need to rebuild anyways. And they're rebuilding, I think, this whole team. But there's not anybody here that is like jaw-dropping. Like Jerry Jeudy 3 years ago, I'd be like, oh, shoot, like they traded Jerry Jeudy. I guess what's that going to mean?
Yeah.
But, I mean, his time in Denver never really panned out as they all initially thought. And so I think Steve Smith would agree with that statement as well.
Yeah. The one I do look at, I think Justin Simmons would be a good one to bring back. He was a very good safety for them. He is a little bit older, but I don't even think he's in his 30s yet. So that's the one for me that I look at, and it's like they should definitely at least consider re-signing him. I know they don't have a ton of cap space.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, they didn't lose anybody too big. They also, like, kind of moving on to their free agent signings, I also don't think that they really brought in anybody that you're like, oh, that was a really good move. Like, excluding the draft, obviously, but like Josh Reynolds, Matt Pert, Calvin Throckmorton, Sam Mustipher, like John Franklin Myers might be the most productive defensive lineman that they brought in. But other than that, I mean, it's really just other kind of rotational players.
Yeah. It seems like it's the biggest one I will say is going to be Zach Wilson. Not the biggest one, but like the most name that everybody knows. But I think that's interesting that they even brought him in. Mm-hmm. That anybody even brought him in. Like I think they gave the Jets a favor by trading for him, just getting him off the roster. But I think that goes to show where the Broncos are at. And this is why, to me, even too, when we look at these draft picks, I look at Bo Nix. It's like Bo Nix, I think, has a short leash. Even though, like, here he's at number 12, and they picked him in the first round. Even during our pre-draft predictions, and we're just kind of walking through all these different scenarios, and without having a second-round pick, it wasn't like they had to take a quarterback at number 12, whoever it was.
Yeah.
And I think if they go 3-14 this year, and they're picking in the top 5, and Shedeur Sanders takes off, they're gonna gladly take Shedeur Sanders over Bo Nix. Or even Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers takes off as well. I mean, there's a lot of other guys who think more talented. And that's what I think, then, to your point as well, like they didn't really get anybody too great and outlandish, and they had trouble with cap space. But I think they're just going through the motions here, maybe trying to find some sort of talent, put on some sort of reasonably decent team and then test out a lot of these young guys to see who they want to try and keep long term. I think that's going to be the whole goal for 2024 this season.
Yeah, I do think that Bo Nix, I don't think that Denver, unless Bo Nix is horribly bad, I don't think Denver is really in the quarterback market in 2025. I think that they will go the build the roster route. Because, like, let's say they're picking like top 3 in the 2024 or 2025 draft. I think that they end up trading that pick for somebody looking to move up for Shedeur Sanders. I don't think that they're really in the market to get Shedeur Sanders, unless Shedeur Sanders turns into a Caleb Williams-esque prospect that you cannot pass up.
Yeah, I think he's better than Bo Nix right now, anyways. And so, but let's see him back up a second year of college. But but I think that goes to my point, though, is like this. I think we know how good Bo Nix is. I think there's not too much more improvement, I feel. And the same thing could be said about Michael Penix as well with Atlanta. I think he's a better quarterback. But I think the Broncos were stuck to take him there. They had to take him there. I think this is why they traded for Zach Wilson even as well, just to have just some more veteran QB experience, just to put a guy back there in the meantime. But if Bo Nix does well enough and then they go 7-10 and then they're picking 11th or 12th, then yes, I could see them not taking the quarterback and just keep trying to rebuild the roster, because who knows. But if one of us is right in our predictions, then I think it is very possible that it is not going to be a good season, or it's not going to be a good sophomore season for Bo Nix, because he might be riding the bench. But that's where I think it's just going to be interesting with how they put this team together for the season, and even too if we move to the offensive depth chart here as well. And so it's like they still have Cortland Sutton, who I think is a good receiver, but just hasn't really had anybody to really throw to him as well. They got Josh Reynolds, who's a fine guy. He's going to be a good support piece. That's what he was up in Detroit as well.
Yeah.
Marvin Mims Jr. coming into his second year, have a much more serious role with the team now that Jerry Jeudy is gone as well. You have some backup guys that you got. I think how the receiving room comes together. I think also then too, just seeing how this offensive line keeps improving, because there are some good guys on there, but they just didn't have good seasons last year just as a whole. Like I do like Quinn Miners, Ben Powers. I think has been solid, but as a whole, just the offensive line didn't have that great of a year. But then too goes back to then how much was it Russell Wilson not doing a good job calling out assignments, calling out blitzes, or any of that stuff. So I think it can kind of go both ways. Just how this whole offense comes together and just everything with this offense now, if Bo Nix is a starting quarterback, that is going to be fascinating just to see how that all gets handled, because he's going to make his rookie mistakes, and you want him to make those rookie mistakes, but keep learning from them. I'm just curious how much more he can improve. From what we've already seen during his 6 years in college.
Yeah, no, and I do think his experience in college will pay dividends for Denver in his rookie season. I do actually. I was not a fan of Troy Franklin in the pre-draft process because everybody had him going in like the top of the second round. Getting him at the top of the fourth round, I think, is really good value. I don't hate this wide receiver room. I think you throw Jerry Jeudy in there, and I definitely feel a lot better about it because I think you have two really good receivers in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I know Jerry Judy's production hadn't quite been there, but I still think you look at his ability to separate and run routes. I know he struggled with drops sometimes too, but I still like him as a receiver. But I don't think this receiving room is that bad. I liked Adam Troutman as well. Greg Dulcich is another interesting tight end piece. So I do think that there is some intrigue here on this offense. I think Audric Estime will eventually become the top back. I know Javonte Williams is the lead back at the moment. I really liked Audric Estime coming out of Notre Dame. So there is definitely some cause for intrigue with this offense. I just don't. I think you have a rookie quarterback. It is like, I think it's going to take this offense time to really get rolling in 2024, and I still think they will probably struggle with a top end playmaker that I think that they could target in the 2025 draft. Because I don't think that they will be in the market for Shedeur Sanders again. I'm going to repeat that just so Broncos fans know where I stand. So
it's all going to depend on where they end up, and we're going to have our record predictions here in a second. And with my record prediction, maybe they'll be in the market. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think though, if they're picking top five, I have to see how Bo Nix does, and if it's a Bo Nix problem or if it's just a roster team problem as well. But then they might just go a whole new direction here. But offensively, it'll be interesting. Defensively is another one as well, just because you go look at their numbers last year, and they didn't rank that well. But at the same time, though, too, they were on the field a lot during the season because the offense really struggled to put up points as well. So how much did that really inflate some of those numbers?
Yeah, I do think this defense got put in some bad positions last year. They were in a similar situation to what the Patriots were, where it's like if they gave up more than like 17 points throughout a majority of the season, they were not going to win that game. So I also, to me, defense is such a mental game. Like you have to be willing to play defense, where when you're on a bad team, it is kind of hard to be willing to play defense. Another thing, after they traded Bradley Chubb a season and a half ago, this defense has struggled with pass rush. It has not been one of the more productive pass rushes. And I feel like as we get more into the air raid, like spread offense era, you need to be having a good pass rush to stifle a lot of these offenses, and they just don't have that. So all in all, I think you look Zach Allen, DJ Jones, John Franklin Myers, Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper. I liked the Jonah Ellis pick. I think he is a really good fit for kind of the 3-4 outside linebacker scheme that they are trying to run. I like Levi Wallace is a good signing. And then Chris Abrams-Drain, we both liked from Missouri. Like, they have some young pieces. I am just very curious, especially on the back end, how it all fits together.
Well, and that's I think the same amount of curiosity. Not the same, maybe a little less, just because they bring back a lot more starters from last year. But yeah, just how is this defense going to piece together? I am curious, as you mentioned, Jonah Ellis, like how's his role? So I think he has an opportunity here, potentially squeak his way in, get a lot more playing time as the season goes on. But it just will a more consistent offense actually help out this defense overall long term? Because statistically, yeah, you go look at their stats, and it seemed like they didn't really do that well at all. 29th overall in total yards. But at the same time, the two, I felt like they were also on the field a vast majority of the game as well, comparative to the offense wasn't nearly that productive. As they would like to be. So how this defense comes together, another year under Sean Payton head coaching regime, which I know he's more of an offensive guy, but still, just as that philosophy keeps kind of going and passing down through the team, it's going to be interesting. I will say, to your point, I remember there were videos of the defensive linemen yelling at Russell Wilson. And to your point, so if it's just that frustrating all the time because you're losing games, does it have that big effect? And so, or how big of an effect does that have on the overall defensive production? Because I'd be exhausted too if I'm playing 79 minutes of a game. I'm like, it's only a 60-minute game, but I'm still playing 79 minutes. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
But all in all, though, when you look at this roster, I agree with you. It's probably the worst roster I think that we've seen. And this is like the third to last video of our offseason recaps that we're doing.
Yeah.
It's just hard to be optimistic about this team because there's so many question marks. And I think as we move on to the schedule as well, I think that's going to kind of reciprocate as well. I think Seattle and Denver playing together. The first time that whenever Seattle and Denver has played, Russell Wilson is not on either team in over a decade. So I think both will kind of slowly rejoice, have a big welcoming let's celebrate. But at Seattle, Pittsburgh, at Tampa, at New York Jets, hosting Las Vegas, hosting the Chargers. None of these teams are amazing. I would say almost actually all these teams, I would say maybe outside the Chargers, are like fringe playoff teams. Right? That would just make the wild card or not. And what concerns me then when I say that is the Broncos, I think, are not going to be favored in any of these games.
Yeah. No, I agree.
They'll win a couple, but it won't be anything. It'll probably be more of a shock win.
Yeah, I think going into the season at Seattle is a tough place to go. Especially, they do have a new head coach and a new offensive coordinator, but they, on paper, are just much better than the Denver Broncos. Pittsburgh at home, I think, is a winnable game. That'll be interesting to see Russell Wilson's return to Denver. At Tampa, that's a tough game. At the Jets, that's a really tough game. Both fairly solid defenses, and if Aaron Rodgers can play, that's a really good offense with the Jets. Las Vegas, tough division game. And then the Chargers, also a tough division game. But I think you look, and obviously we haven't seen anything from Bo Nix yet, but outside of the Pittsburgh game, I think Bo Nix is has been the worst quarterback on this schedule.
Oh, yeah, no, he's probably it's not fair to Bo Nix just to say, but all the QBs, there's a lot of good QBs in the league, especially on the AFC. And if you're looking at starters, Bo Nix is probably 32nd, maybe 31st.
Yeah.
I'm trying to even think who would be. Maybe him and Gardner Minshew.
In my argument, he's also starting at 0. You don't have the quarterback edge in any of these matchups, and I think your roster is worse, I guess is a better way of what I'm trying to say. I have them, I think, 2-4 or 1-5 coming out of this stretch.
I think 2-4 would be good just with this roster. Yeah. And then I think then you move into the middle part of the season at New Orleans on Thursday Night Football, Carolina, at Baltimore, at Kansas City, Atlanta, at Arizona, Cleveland Monday Night Football, and then a Week 14 bye. So 7 games there during that stretch.
Yeah.
And once again, maybe New Orleans and Carolina, I think, but then maybe Arizona. I think Arizona is going to be much improved overall. Yeah. It's just once again just going to be a tough stretch. They'll win a couple of those games. If they go 3-4 during that stretch, that'll be really good. But 2-5 will probably be the more realistic route during this stretch here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even if they can come out with two wins, I think that's a win for what this roster is and what they're able to do. So wrapping it up here, Indianapolis in Denver. I hope it's better than the last time Indianapolis went to Denver. At the Chargers, at Cincinnati, and then Kansas City. Again, I think Indianapolis and the Chargers could be winnable games, but at Cincinnati and Kansas City, I think they should just steamroll them. I just don't think that there's really much debate with the talent that's on each roster.
Yeah, especially with like week 17 and 18, I guess, depending on where. Well, week 17 should still be an important game for both those teams. Like if Kansas City's like the division and potentially even home field advantage, like maybe they won't play anybody to rest, and so then that's why maybe that game is winnable. But even, I mean, we're talking super speculative. This is already speculative video, and then we're talking about like how well these teams are going to end up doing. And so, but yeah, in general though, like not favored in any of those games. It's even kind of coming to then when looking at the schedule. If we want to move on to my record predictions, it's like I was trying to be, because these are professionals still, and even too, we saw it last year. Like the Cardinals went on a nice little stretch in the last couple. Giants, another one. Like not good teams at all, but they're still professionals. They were able to figure out ways to manufacture some wins at the end. So maybe that's what will happen. But even too, I'm looking at my 6-11 record, and I'm like, I think that's still too high.
Yeah,
I think your 4-13 is probably a good average. 6-11, I think, is the ceiling. And I think if you win a couple games, the first 6 weeks, and 2 or 3 in that middle column that we did, and then maybe pick off one, that might be best case scenario. But this is where there's so many question marks about this team. Then you're going to have Bo Nix or Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson as a starting quarterback, none of which are any better options over the other if we're talking about just overall playability. It just seems like, and this is what I was saying earlier, is if 6-11 is the ceiling, but like 3-14 is the floor, that's where they're going to be picking 6th or 7th at the latest in next year's draft. And that's where I look at it's just if Bo Nix can't develop and can't show that he's the guy, then they might even start over again at the quarterback position. Because I think teams now just final point, look at my Falcons now as well, drafting Michael Penix. I think teams now are going to realize like we need to get a franchise guy first and build around him, because these guys can go and play for 15 or 20 years if they're healthy. And I just don't think Bo Nix is going to be the franchise guy. I think he's just a stopgap during this time. And so then at minimum, then he'll be a good backup for whenever this new rookie comes in. I
slightly disagree. I think there's 2 factors. How well does Bo Nix progress under Sean Payton by the end of the year? And how good does Shedeur Sanders look? Because I really don't think Carson Beck, you're not swapping out Carson Beck or Bo Nix for Carson Beck. That's a lateral step in my opinion. Bo Nix is a better athlete. Carson Beck maybe has a slightly better arm, but like really not anything in my opinion. So it really solely depends on if Shedeur Sanders can go out and look like a Caleb Williams type prospect. Because even if Shedeur Sanders goes out and looks like a little bit better than he did last year, I don't think that is worth Denver. That's a really hard sell to Denver ownership and general managers. That this, like, I know we just drafted a guy 12th overall last year who we thought was really, really good, but this guy is so much better.
Well, but I also think too, if we're talking about the ownership aspect of it, I think ownership could also be like, are we really going to roll out with Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson as our 2 QBs? So if you're talking to the ownership, be like, hey, look, we got this shiny new toy, pick number 12, like let's start him. And then when he doesn't pan out, then he was picked 12th overall. He was a 6th QB ranked in the draft. Like we kind of had to, because it's either him or Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson.
And so, I understand that argument. I just think if you aren't sure that he's going to be the starter there for at least a couple seasons, you don't take him at 12. And that's where like you do say to ownership, like, we'll go, like, if you're not confident in that, you take Spencer Rattler at 86 or whatever they picked at in the 3rd. And I know you can't tell that he's going to be there, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, but another thing though too, and then just to rebuttal a little bit, is then this new head coach and GM regime though can say, Like we didn't have a second round pick because the previous regime traded it away for the QB that we had to get rid of because he sucked, and Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that luxury to try and trade back. They had to take a QB there, or you take Spencer Rattler at 76. And I don't think that's an even worse situation.
But
I think so. All of this is speculative, as well as this whole channel is speculative. But it's I think we've seen Bo Nix at his ceiling. I think he had a great college career. I think he's gonna. I just don't think he's going to translate over to the NFL. But we were saying, though, I'll hand over an olive branch. We were saying if any QB I think would fit best in the Sean Payton system, or at least if they're looking something comparable to what Russell Wilson was last year, Bo Nix was a lot of dink and dunk type passes or a deep ball throw at Oregon. Like that's what a lot of high percentage throws. And that's what they had to do with Russell Wilson. So I think he might be able to fit in immediately. It's just, can he take it to another level?
Yeah.
To where he's averaging 250 passing yards a game, not 200 like Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Well, but that is what Sean Payton wanted to do, and Russell Wilson struggled to do that. I think Bo Nix will actually do it well. And he'll take more of what's there.
He averaged just over 200 yards per game because Russell Wilson played in 15 games and he had 3,070 passing yards.
Yeah.
So it's like just about 200.
Yeah.
Per game, if I'm doing my math correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be interesting, I think, to see what Denver's able to do. I also think if you look, Luther Burden is a really good wide receiver prospect. And then there's the kid from Arizona, Teixeira, I believe is his last name, who looks like another really good prospect. I think those would be very enticing options to pair with Bo Nix, especially if this offensive line and running game can improve somewhat, because they were already barely below average. So if they can get to above average, I think that would help Bo Nix. Then you get him a weapon as well. I think that would help this offense a lot. And if it is horribly bad, like Zach Wilson bad, then I think then yes, maybe Shedeur Sanders isn't an argument. But if he is, I don't want to say Mac Jones because that was a good rookie season. It just didn't pan out after that. But like, if he is able to look somewhat like Mac Jones did his rookie year, I think that they roll the dice and try to build this offense.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'd say that Mac Jones, but even Mac Jones, I think, was a better QB than Bo Nix. I mean, it's unfair because Bo Nix was at that Auburn team, while Mac Jones was on an Alabama team, and they weren't even fair teams. I still think though, Mac Jones, I think, processed the game better during that time. Now, but then Bo Nix spent 2 more years in college, or 3 more years in college. So but he could have learned a lot during that time as well, which he did. Like, he has improved.
Bo Nix has a better arm and is more athletic, and I think how they see the game is somewhat comparable.
Yeah.
Somewhat. Mac Jones maybe was a little bit better processor, but it also helps when you're throwing to Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith at Alabama behind 2 other first-round picks and 3 other drafted offensive linemen. It's very, very different.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And so it'll be fascinating to watch. There's not – of all the teams we've done, this is the team I think that is – I'm more confident is going to do poorly this year. But it's still going to – there's a lot of intriguing things and storylines. Well, like, how is this defense really going to improve? Or are they going to try and blow it up again, move on from
Pat Surtain?
Pat Surtain, yeah. Who's, I think, a good prospect as well that teams would trade for. Offensively, Cortland Sutton, he's been there now for 6 years. He hasn't been on an offense really that's done that well. But at the same time, though, like, is it the offense or maybe is it him? Just those questions I think start to pan out as well.
He's been a multi-time 1,000-yard receiver. He is a good weapon. He's actually one of the only true X receivers I think left in the league. Him, and he's not quite on the level of T. Higgins, but
I'd say Nico Collins would be a guy. But he's only had one good year.
Yeah. So all in all, I think Denver is a very interesting team. They are in a tougher division, especially with Kansas City. I think the Raiders are going to be a decent team as well. The AFC itself is just loaded.
The AFC's loaded. I'll say this. Actually, Cortland Sutton's only had one 1,000-yard receiving season.
How
He
many
hasn't had
times?
anything more than 829.
Oh, really?
2022. Yeah.
Oh,
So it's just going to be interesting, and that's where the Broncos team. I looking at it now, I'm projecting they're probably going to be. I think my 6-11 record actually was too high. I think I was maybe too kind. Maybe I just had ice cream or something while I was doing that record. But I think they're going to even be worse than 6-11 now after talking through it and convincing myself.
yeah.
And so I think they're going to be picking the top 5, and then I think that it's also another thing as well in final factor going in that they're picking top 5 if they move on from Bo Nix. Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, they also have to make that argument as well that, hey, I'm a top 5 draft pick.
Yeah.
They have to keep improving.
I really only think Shedeur is worth the top 5 pick, but again, we'll see how this season plays out.
Quinn Ewers maybe. I think Quinn Ewers might be, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. So, but let's go ahead and wrap this up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the Denver Broncos 2024 offseason. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? Also, let us know what you think their record will be. And other than that, we will see you guys next time.